an American, and he spent most of his ministry in
American Pope! We have an American Pope! It's
What?
an American Pope!
No way.
All right, folks, we're live. They're announcing the Pope. We're going to find out who the Pope is.
The Pope is Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, who's taken the name of Leo the 14th. Pope Leo the 14th.
Leo the
Who is
14th,
that
you
guy?
say?
It's an American, and he spent most of his ministry in
American Pope! We have an American Pope! It's
What?
an American Pope!
No way. What? Oh gosh, I just jumped on, man.
Pope America!
So is this a dark horse? Is this just a complete?
I don't know. It just happened.
Robert Francis Prevost.
That's the new pope?
Yes.
Leo the 14th.
Leo the 14th. All right. Pull up everything
Crazy
we've
thing
got on the
about Leo
Leos.
the 14th. Michael Knowles predicted that would be the regnal name of the Pope.
They're playing the cards. They know which way the wind's blowing. The Trump train has got Vatican
Is that
influence.
conservative? Hold on.
I have no idea.
We don't know. Quick.
There's a bunch of people I'm glad it's not.
An American.
Wait.
Listen
I
to
thought
all of
that
Europe's
you're
freaking
serious.
out
This
right
is
now.
an
They're
American
like,
Pope right now?
Oh, there's an American Pope. All right, let me see.
No way.
Pope Leo the 13th was interesting. Who are the other Leos? We need to know. Dude. All right.
Sorry.
A native of Chicago, Illinois.
Pope Leo.
Of Chicago, Illinois.
That's a strong name. I like it.
I'm
Robert
pretty sure.
Francis Prevost, an American Catholic. Dude, how many
odds
people
of
are cheering
Donald
in the
Trump
audience now?
being
Like
Pope
the two
have
Americans.
crashed.
Can we get a MAGA miter? Can we? That's going to be the thumbnail. That's going to be the thumbnail. Make the Vatican
Okay.
great again, and it's going to be a red
gosh.
Pope hat with. Dude.
Dude, it's funny. It's like they don't even have articles prepared for an American Pope. There's all
No.
the other.
Aaron, Europe is losing their. Look at like the.
Was he? He
Oh,
wasn't
man.
even on the list of people to like the
No,
prediction.
total
predict
dark
it with.
horse.
Dude, for real? Yeah, what were the betting? Pull up the. What's the betting?
Yeah, so the betting was. Let me go back to the other one. Okay.
So he's
Yeah,
seen as
so
like what, a centrist.
this guy had, if you see, he's the blue line, and you couldn't see the blue line on this graph. Oh, hold on, I'm not sharing that one.
All right, let's see.
So okay.
Okay. Yeah, this
All right.
guy's odds in the betting markets were the blue line, and so you could see
He's
that
just
didn't
totally
exist
not even
until
there.
Whoa!
about 20 minutes
Jeez.
ago.
I love it.
Holy cow.
My Pope
Wild.
history is it's not so great. I did watch an entire like hour-long YouTube video on the entire history of every Pope. Like, it just gave like a quick tidbits starting at the beginning, going through. Which, by the way, if you're a big on the whole like the Pope is very important and like this is goes all the way back and it was established in this way, like yeah, go watch that video. I should see if I can find it and link it in the description. See how confident you feel after
Mute
watching
these silly
that.
voiceovers. Okay, American Pope. That's
Bro.
very interesting.
Pope
Is this the
America.
first American? Well, he's
Yes.
got dual citizenship.
Oh, yeah.
So he's
Whatever,
technically-
man.
Dual
Whatever.
citizenship
These colors don't run.
Yeah.
They rule. Man. Is he the first American Pope?
Yes. Yes.
Wow. Man, how about, look at that. America. I'm telling you right now, dude.
Jeez.
Donald Trump is about
look
to
how
post a
sad everybody
MAGA
looks.
miter.
In the audience in Europe, they're like,
Oh, I know. They're
What?
like, wait, what's happening right now? What's happening? Can you, like, Europe is literally going to lose their minds. I can see it now. Oh my gosh. Oh, I cannot wait to see the commentary on this.
All right.
So what do we
I
know
need to
about
ask
this guy?
Grok. Yeah, it's hard to
looking
find,
it up.
really. Well, especially because a lot of the
It's
stuff, like,
so-
other positions are, like, really niche Catholic stuff that I don't
I know,
care
right?
about.
right.
All right, so what's this guy's name again? His,
What
before
are-
the Leo.
His name,
his human name,
is
his
Robert,
slave name.
Robert Prevost, Cardinal
Prevost?
Robert Prevost, right? It's American Peruvian. Let me see.
Oh, okay. American Peruvian.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
The plot thickens.
Okay, emphasizes a synodal church. Well, that's...
American Cardinal.
strongly committed to social justice.
American
Wait,
Pope.
poor and marginalized, or
Yeah, he's a
gay
centrist, but
and
not-
degenerate, though.
Yeah.
That's...
It's what we really need to know.
In 2012, he expressed concern about Western culture promoting sympathy for beliefs and practices that contradict the gospel. Which practices and beliefs, Pope?
Unless you're saying
Specifically
all of them.
mentioning the
in which case,
homosexual lifestyle. Okay,
2 thumbs, way up.
so far.
What is going on here, interwebs? I'm trying to pull up, see this dude's story.
Okay, so he's a fence sitter on the gay
How old is he?
stuff.
How can you be a fence sitter as a cardinal?
1955. He was born 1955. So he's what, 70?
Yeah, 70 on the dot.
Interesting.
Well, he'll be 70
So
this
a
year,
short play.
right? September 14th.
It is
He was
interesting
born.
how
Close collaborator of Francis. So that's a mark against him.
So
Dude,
he's,
you know,
this seems to be the thing. Like they're just only electing older
Yeah.
popes because they don't want to. Like it's not like Pope John Paul II was
Yeah,
bad. or
man.
anything.
stinking no, John Paul, like, yeah, that's what's
He did a
crazy because
lot.
he was the
But
Pope
he
for
was like 40 years or something, 50 years.
a long
Yeah,
time.
well, I mean, that makes sense. You saw what happened when Jude Law was the Pope. You can't...
That's
you
right.
know.
Nobody
Can't
wants-
have that.
nobody
By the
wants
way,
a
did
young
you see
pope.
the Anthony Hopkins, the movie? What was it? The Two Popes or whatever, where it's there's a guy who plays kind of Francis and what's it called? Anthony Hopkins plays Ratzinger or whatever the guy's the previous
Benedict,
one's
yeah.
name was. There's a great scene where he's like, he's found in the God's found in the journey, and he's like, well, let's go journey over here. Perhaps we'll meet God, and I'll introduce you to him. Like he's throwing like it's on a shit
Right.
at Francis's character. Oh, it's hilarious, dude. That's
This is
nuts.
so- there's like nothing about him online that I've been able
yeah, I'm
to
on his Wikipedia page right now. Like,
Yeah, I literally could only get something of substance by asking Grok, and it was lightly sourced. I'll say that.
Yeah.
He opposes ordaining women to clerical roles.
it's pretty
All right,
standard
let's-
stuff. One would imagine.
Well, yeah, it is. Let's turn on Thinking Grok and regenerate this.
Fascinating.
I'm going to
Well-
need some of my screen to be cropped out
I know. You're
in
good.
post.
Okay.
So I'm curious.
We don't even have to share it.
Yeah, you can unshare right now
I can
until it
unshare
pops
it in
up.
post.
Yeah.
Well,
Just
I
like my
can
whole
make it not
bookmarks
come up.
thing up top there was just like very much.
Comment down below if you found anything interesting.
I mean, I've got like just thermoelectric modules, large open source large language models, supplements, Mylar
normal
bags
stuff.
for food storage.
Bad. So yeah, if you're watching right now and you're what do you think about all this? What are your thoughts? Team American Pope. I mean, that's a win. I feel like that's a good thing. If I was a Pope supporting individual, I'm glad he's an American. On the other hand, the whole Pope thing. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It is fascinating.
Well, did you see the thing that I linked earlier, which was the sedevacantism? It's a group of Catholics who believe there has been no legitimate pope since, what was it, 1968 or something?
Yeah, it's pre-Vatican II, basically.
Or,
Yeah,
58, you said, I think it was,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, this is the thing that's hilarious is, pre the institution of conclave, because it took however many months or years to select the Pope before. And before that, there were so many anti-popes. Like, there were multiple periods where they were like, this guy's the Pope. No, this guy's the Pope. And I'm just sitting here going like, I thought you guys had this whole apostolic succession thing pretty locked down. Like, but apparently not, Turns out money and friends tend to play pretty heavily in the selection process for a large portion of church history. But,
All right, supports efforts to aid migrants, of course.
Yeah.
Pastoral care for divorced Catholics.
Like, if all the places in the United States that we would have a pope come from, we don't want it to come from New York, Chicago, or California. And
He's
we
from
got
Chicago.
Chicago, yeah. So
Yep.
I mean, it's.
But
All right, this is my guess. This is what I think is happening here with this total dark horse candidate. Okay, this is just my hot take. Okay, this guy looks like he's pretty much in line with Francis, but he's not really on the record having said that.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah, it seems like it's right there. He just hasn't had the actions.
Right. So the reason for doing that is if you don't want actually to have a substantive change in direction, but you want to make your increasingly traditional Catholic base in places like, America, not accelerate in their rejection of the Universal
seat.
Catholic Church. And so my guess is that, at least at first, because that's the whole benefit of choosing someone who's not on the record on a lot of these things, is like the Pope doesn't have that much power. So just shut up, right? Do whatever popey things you're supposed to do, and let all the various Catholics do what they're going to do. Whereas Francis was really, really overt about a lot of relatively radical stuff, radical in the spectrum of the Catholic Church. And so that's my guess. That's my guess, is that they're looking for someone who's basically ideological in line with Francis, but will not make so many Catholics, especially prominent ones and traditional ones, uncomfortable with his positions.
Yeah, that tracks. I'd buy that. Yeah, I think, like you were talking about earlier too, I think a general trend towards, hey, let's not bring somebody in who's got a 40 or we're looking down a 40-year tenure. I think
they get to redo this in basically 15 or 20 years.
Yeah, so we get a mulligan, we can kind of adjust fire, and then I think, I definitely think this kind of goes back to what we talked about in our last episode. The split and the change that's going on in, I won't say the split or change, maybe those are both the wrong words, but the appeal that Catholicism is happening right now within the conservative, especially within the conservative right and with young people in Gen Z. And I think they have to have somebody, like you said, that's a reasonable pick. Someone that's not gonna no overt flag for Donald Trump to tweet about.
Yeah, they want to continue the momentum on the traditional side that they have without actually changing anything about internally the beliefs about their
Yeah.
How things should be done if they could just decree that it would be so. Because for all the supposed centralized authority that's vested in the Pope, that's illusory.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, people, at least at a membership lay level, can either leave or they can be dissidents within your thing. Like that's not good. Like the Pope doesn't have an army. How many
Right.
legions does the Pope command? I guess I probably shouldn't just be directly quoting Stalin, but you get the idea.
Yes. Yes. But it is a reasonable thing. I mean, and that is, I mean, the whole world is kind of sitting on that edge right now of, and it is a hard place. I think even as Christians, I think it's an interesting place to be, because it's, on the one side, it's taking care and reaching, taking care of people who are in need of help and being support and being a light to the world and bringing the gospel to people, taking care of those who are less fortunate, Christian charity and all of that. But on the other side of that, have many countries around the world right now dealing with immigration crises because of poor management of borders and poor immigration policy and poor social welfare policy.
Yeah. Well, the inability to order your obligations in a biblical or
manner.
even just practical way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also a complete, because here's the problem, is that you've got your two greatest commandments, and the secular world is at least comfortable on paper with the second one. Love
Right.
your neighbor as yourself, right? Well, if you don't do that under the umbrella of the greatest commandment, you're not doing that at all. And so that's where you get these things like, bless the same-sex unions or whatever else it happens to be, whatever, immoral, anti-biblical position that the liberal Catholics or all progressive Christians generally are taking. It's like, okay, so you just decided that you were going to get rid of the greatest command. It's like, no, say we're still Christians because we have this other one, and we're doing a really good job on that, but we have absolutely no guidelines or guardrails for how we implement it.
Yeah, the whole, that's a good point. I mean, that's why there's two, right? He says on these two commandments hang the whole of the law, and that's your guidepost right there, right? It's like, and I think that's the point, right? It's not just seeking God; it's seeking what God is seeking. You can't seek God. You can't seek what God is seeking to do outside of His power and His righteousness. So if you try to do the work of the kingdom apart from the power of God and apart from the righteousness of God, then you're gonna fail. And if you try to pursue God but neglect the work of the kingdom, you're gonna miss it. And so, I think that's a really good point. And so, I think and so you imagine then there's there's the whole scale issue. So, we're talking about this in that context as at the individual level, but then one of the really interesting things about Catholicism and the papacy and the Vatican is you kind of get to see, at least in some small form, a measure of Christian theocracy, so to speak, in this context. So we can kind of see how the calculus of selecting a nation state Christian leader, the politics of faith in who they pick. And that's that is interesting to me when you're talking about electing a spiritual leader that's also a political leader. Whether or not they have, we could debate the finer points of how
they've
much of a
chosen to
nation.
be political, though.
For sure.
Because it wasn't necessarily a recent thing. Obviously, the popes have been political for a really long time, but for a while there was a lesser amount of overt politicization of things, just because their earthly power had diminished to a significant extent. And so 19th 20th century popes were not nearly as aggressive about overtly political topics. They were only weighing in for the most part, with the exception of John Paul on Poland and things like that. But you didn't see this kind of overt 50-50 issue, Pope weighing in on controversial stuff.
Yeah, because you didn't have that kind of division within the populace.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a
at
big,
least certainly not within the church.
yeah, that's my point, right? Like, it's like those are debates that the outside world is having. Christianity is pretty united in its understanding of what is sin and what is not. I want to go back to, I got to make that Gantt chart or that chart. It's like, is it sin? You know, like, yes, very simple, very simple, you know? But yeah, I mean, but you know, that it's still interesting to know too, that, I mean, like the whole concept of like papal states or like the statehood. I mean, again, I don't know when the Vatican was explicitly became its own country, but at least like from a quick Google, it says that the papal states were founded in 754 AD. So that's a pretty long run where they were not, you know, where they were basically like the church was the church and acting as the church, and there was not this, you know, explicitly political. And then of course, you know,
Pope Gregory, I think the first was the first legitimate pope, or the actual like recorded that we would consider a pope as being the head of the church. That from a Protestant standpoint of the church history standpoint, because there's always been the Bishop of Rome.
I can hear the Catholics commenting Peter in the comments section. Right?
That's fine. But let's go back to church history and let's see if everybody looked and basically submitted to the Church of Bishop.
No, they didn't.
No, they didn't. So, you know, there's all kinds of. Here's an interesting point. I was looking at the College of Cardinals, in regard to the way that it's made up of like how they vote, like how would they vote. And I think what's interesting, let me know you can see my screen. What's interesting here, you can see which cardinal was created by which pope, and there's a whole lot of Francis here.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
And a lot of Francis voting. So like, here's the thing, man. If Robert, this new pope, if he is like from like Francis's line of political ideology, it's going to be just essentially Francis and this guy that are going to be pointing all of the cardinals. Right. It doesn't seem...
It's a snake that eats its own tail, right? You tend to get more of what you... Yeah.
Well, what's interesting, and there's like a bunch of them that are non-voting. Like, so a lot of Benedict's assigned were not voting. Granted, I don't know where Benedict lined up, but a lot of the Francis cardinals, the majority of them are all Francis. Some of them are John Paul, but most of them are Francis. And I don't see there being any other politics of you know, the political alignment of these cardinals being elected that are outside of the progressive, or that are not progressive here in the future. And those are the ones that are voting. I don't think we're ever going to see any kind of conservative ever again, or any kind of traditionalist, or even a centrist. Not. So what's going to be interesting is like I don't see anything that would fall in line.
Self-preservation is a powerful tool, is a powerful motivator. And I think that's what's going to, I really do. I think it's just like within, you know, Protestant circles as well. It's like at a certain point, if you lose your ability to, let me rephrase this. This kind of stuff works in normal politics because the game's made up and the points don't matter. Like, people have completely unmoored themselves from any level of moral foundation. They don't really care about the Constitution as a guide. They are heavy on revision, like, hey, we can do whatever we want. We can make it go whichever way we want to go. But an organization like Catholicism, or in a church like the Vatican, and to stand on these, you know, absolute dogmatic statements, you can only go so far from the goalpost before you open yourself up to like legitimate challenge from people willing to stand up and say it. Now, I don't know.
What do you think is going to be that event, or when is that going to come?
I think that's what's going to happen eventually if it goes that direction. Either they just placate and people remain where they're at. How is
Provost or Prevost going to respond to that kind of uprising in the Catholic Church? Like, would he?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like,
his position based on that, and I don't see that he would. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't even know if there's going to be that big of a pushback.
Yeah,
because it's more of the same right now.
I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't know if you know anything about canon law. You know, within Rome, like, can you depose a pope? Like, how does that work?
Not without getting excommunicated.
Can a cardinal? Yeah, can a cardinal lead a schism or threaten schism for.
No one
Right.
rid me of this turbulent priest. There's always a way.
We got to figure that out. Maybe we should do an episode, and it says like an episode on that. We'll do like a whole, like, we haven't really done like an explainer video. Maybe that would be a funny one to do. So you want to depose a pope, a pontiff.
Right.
So you'd like to start a schism. Yeah, I'm telling God about this guide to schism. What do you think?
Yeah.
We want to see it? We'll show you how. If there's a way, we'll find out.
Okay, so 108 of the 135 voting members of the college were appointed by Francis.
There you go.
Yeah.
Francis,
Now that's going to be
Francis.
muted a little bit. Like, obviously, they're not all carbon copies of Francis, and so obviously the feeder of what becomes a cardinal is dependent
Right.
on the available pool and the region that they're in. So those guys are, but you can obviously start to tilt that in your direction by, if you're always choosing the most liberal, least traditional candidate of the ones available, you're going to move that needle for sure. But the distinction between voting and non-voting member just has to do with whether or not you are over or under 80 years old.
Interesting. Like,
Yeah.
in other words, am I going to have to live with the results of my decisions?
But apparently that rule was established in 1970. So
Interesting.
it's almost like, did you just want to suddenly truncate the influence of older cardinals that you didn't pick? Is that what
Could
went
be.
on there? That's
Seems
how
like
it sounds to me.
Seems like it. Sounds very spirit-led.
Right? Well, that's why once a pope has been captured once, if they're committed to seeing that the succession follows their views, they have a great deal of power to see that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
I could see
if
that.
you could just be like, oh no, you guys don't get to vote anymore. That's
Right. Yeah, that's it. It's just me and my friends. We'll be doing all the voting now. Thank you very much.
I honestly,
Yeah.
with this pope, I don't see a whole lot of Catholic apologists being super excited. Because I don't think that a lot of these Catholic apologists were super excited about Francis and what he was doing, but they kind of didn't comment. These weird Catholic apologists, they don't really comment on popes. They don't like defending
because they can't.
the specific pope. They'll defend the succession of apostolic succession and all that stuff, but they don't like talking about the direct popes. And they sometimes will make a comment about things that they have said and why it needs to be corrected or something like that. But at the same time, it's not. I don't know how much weight it really has in general across all of Catholicism, which is maybe it's encouraging that the Pope doesn't necessarily get a say. And let's be honest. Has the Pope said, Pope Francis, did he say or do anything that affected the United States in its immigration policy? No.
No, not at
really.
all.
Even with Biden just opened it up, but it wasn't because of the Pope. You know what I mean?
No, here's the thing. You and I, we generally have our own beliefs about things, and if we feel the need to challenge those or work those out with each other, we are happy to do that and consider what we think. But for a lot of people, it would be akin to me having a position on any professional sports, right? Mm-hmm. I don't care. Any thought that I have is just a reflection. It's just a mirror of what people who I do know who care around me are saying. And that's the extent to which a large number of people engage with politics, but also like those higher level abstract issues of, church governance and policy and things like that. And so I don't like that not having hard power in that sense, I don't think is a good reason to say, oh, it just doesn't matter. I think what you
sure. I
get
don't
is
think
you're
I'm
adding
saying
a
that.
rudder
Yeah.
to a large number of Catholics who are more or less just going to go with what the guy in the tall white
That's
hat
true.
says.
Yeah, I just don't know if there's any. I don't think it affects the global kind of stance or policy, other than people kind of say, unless I don't know, unless he actually takes some
that's not
hard
really true,
stances
though,
on things.
because some
You know
of
what I
the
mean?
biggest NGOs that are responsible for facilitating the large movement of people from both South America and Africa into
controlled
the Western northern developed nations
Vatican.
are Catholic. In fact, I would go so far as to say that all of the biggest ones
Sure.
are Catholic. And that doesn't happen without the assent and,
Sure.
impulse
That's true.
of
Yeah,
the
I mean,
hierarchy.
we've seen what NGOs have done with USAID, right? So I mean, that's very true. But that money has kind of been cut
But
off.
the
That's not to
USA
say
money
that-
was going to these Catholic NGOs to move people aggressively across
Yeah.
borders.
But there's also the issue of like not doing anything is doing something, because really what I do think, if we had a pope that was drastically conservative, then you would see a lot of influence. You would see more, because the truth is that the Catholic Church has a tremendous amount of power to wield if it so chose to. I mean, if the Pope came out and said straight up, like, listen to me, if you claim to be a Catholic and like, we know who you are, politicians / people working, like, and you're not doing what you should be doing, through the course of your job and these different things, and you're basically acting against, righteousness in your responsibilities, we're going to refuse you communion.
right?
You'd start
Which
seeing
is salvific.
Yeah.
You would start seeing very serious, and I want to remember this too, because that was a big deal. And like when JFK got elected, that was part of the reason that people were pretty nervous about the idea of having a president that was a Catholic, because there was this very real understanding that like
Right, is he going
so
to be
if the Pope
subordinate
says,
to the Pope?
if the Pope says do this, are you really going to like not do that? Like who is your allegiance to? And that's so I think it is interesting to me, because just to your point, Josh, though, but like another 10 years of a Pope or a leader of the Catholic Church not just simply acknowledging righteousness, but promoting it with the tools at his disposal, only his disposal, has a net.
An Argentinian Pope before America. We've been the
I know.
center of the world for 80 years.
I know.
It's offensive. I feel that this was overdue.
Well, it's kind of
Sorry,
goes
not to
back
cut
to.
you off.
Well,
No, you're right.
we can
Yeah.
celebrate by reviewing some of the best Catholic Pope memes that we have
Oh, I'm
on
here
the
for it.
internet.
Let's
go
go.
ahead. Let's start. Here we go. So
Number one.
Donald Trump drops this. Did you see the interview? The what was it? The reporter said, what do you think about the meme that was posted of you as the Catholic? What do you think about that? He's like, I've never seen it before. Maybe it was AI. Of course it's AI. Like, I don't know how they got that picture of me in the post. Like, of course it's AI, man. Like, anyway, he's like, this is ridiculous. Like, don't you think this is offensive? He's like, please ask a serious question. Like, Catholics have.
No,
a
I
sense
loved
of
it.
humor. That
They
was
said,
pretty
"What do you say
funny.
to Catholics?
Oh.
What do you say to Catholics who are offended by your posting of that?" And he's like, "They can't take a joke." What are you saying? They can't take a joke?
Right.
Like, it's funny. Like,
Yeah.
calm down.
Well, then
Don't take
there's
yourself so seriously.
Dude, this one. I don't know if he actually probably this one.
Oh my gosh.
Did Donald Trump actually post that?
I know that Donald Trump posted the Pope picture for sure. I don't know if he posted the Mar-a-Lago
I don't
conflict.
know. I didn't check. This is not verified. But
Yeah, I mean, he did
oh my-
own Miss Universe, so
possible.
it
That
tracks.
was a pretty funny one. This
The
one.
new Pope had a Twitter account before the
we know.
orange smoke.
This is awesome. Orange smoke, and then here's my favorite one. There
Oh
we
my
go.
gosh.
What is this?
That's-
Pope Trump? What is it? The 72nd? I don't know what is that Roman
XL.
number? XL.
That's what is that? 37?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Oh, 47. Jeez.
47. Oh,
Get
that's
it?
right. Of course. Duh.
Yeah.
Okay. Here I don't
Roman
know how to
numerals. Those are hard.
Vatican has chosen a new pope, and Catholics around the world are separating Pope Donald Trump the 47th. And JD
this
Vance,
guy is every bit as liberal as Francis. Sorry, I just
yeah.
found his Twitter account. So he's like on February 3rd, he just straight up tweeted,
send some
JD
posts,
Vance
we'll
is
share it.
wrong. Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others. So
Oh, my
I'm sure he'll be
gosh.
getting a visit from the vice president soon.
Not too soon,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Jeez. Gosh.
Oh man.
This it's getting actually quite out of hand. That some of them are hilarious, but I don't know what to make of these. So check this one out.
All right, let's
Let's see if you can. Can you hear it?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Dude, the internet is undefeated. Oh my gosh. Dude, this has got to be the opener. That's got to be the opening clip. Just like go from like they've picked the Pope and then cut to that, and then we'll go into our
are ridiculous. Now, anyway, I'm hoping that it would be nice to see Catholics kind of and the whole structure and the organization, like in an amazing, perfect world, if they started preaching the gospel from like repentance of sin standpoint, which there was like one clip that went viral on X, and it was like of a priest that was like, we can't preach the gospel without talking about righteousness, and everyone's like, all of the Protestants kind of like perked up and started sharing that. It's like,
Go on.
yeah. It's the passion.
All right, he's
that he had when he was
anti-death
preaching
penalty.
is crazy. Most Catholics are anti-death penalty, I think.
Is that common?
Right? I think
That's-
so.
Man,
yeah.
they were like the world leaders in death penalty administration
Bro.
for centuries.
They had it
and now you're
down
just going
to
to be
a
like, oh,
science.
no, way to pull the ladder up after you, guys.
Oh man. I think after Mussolini, they were, the majority of people after the 40s, people were kind of like, maybe we want to limit the amount of legal ways the government has to kill us. There seem to already have enough,
There needs to be a quota for sure. You should definitely be eliminating at least 3% of your population
We know what we
annually
need.
via
We
the
need
death
something.
penalty. Just a ranking.
Well, here's the crazy
Yeah.
thing. Here's what we do. We should elect a young man or woman from each state, and we'll have like a lottery, and we'll put them in a dome, and we'll just
Go on.
Describing the plot of the
And
Hunger
then-
Games.
Yeah.
we'll let them kill
I've
each
seen this movie. Battle Royale
It'll all
is better,
be a
for the
reminder
record.
of why we don't want to uprise and go against.
Speaking of that,
federal government,
have you seen
right?
the original? Have you seen Battle Royale?
Yeah.
The one
Japanese
it was
one?
based off
Yeah.
of? Yeah, I loved that premise where it's like during the crime, crisis of like the late 80s, early 90s, and Japan's like, we know just how to fix this. We're going to take one class of middle schoolers every year and we're going to make them fight to the death just so they know what's up. Like, so the parents are like basically putting kids in their place. Like, yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I think what's going to be funny about this is, and I could totally see this happening, and I think it would be hilarious, is what if this guy, forget the fact that he might be as liberal as Francis or like super squishy, what if he just gets turned into a total trope as like the American Pope, and like despite who this guy actually is, all anybody sees or promotes him as is like
American?
MAGA Pope?
That would be great. That would
And
be
so,
great.
like, I don't believe in any of these things, but like his entire meme persona, and like you can't Google this guy without seeing him as like Macho Man Randy Savage, and like the papal tiara. Like, that's where that's the move.
It is. Especially since he chose Leo. I mean, there's a lot of...
That's what I'm saying.
Imagery.
When you said Leo, the first thing that I thought was like, when they said Leo, I was like, who is this? Like, really? You're an American Pope
Yeah.
and you chose Leo? The only thing that would have been better is if you had picked
He is
Urban.
every bit as liberal as Francis was.
Pope Urban II, wasn't he the Crusades Pope?
Yes. Yes. That's what I was. That was my whole point.
Yes.
And I think Leo was also, but Urban was the one that initiated it. But I think Leo. Am I wrong about that? I could be.
I thought there was Pope.
No, Urban II wrote
Urban was
he
first crusade.
wrote the document that basically talked about remittance for sins via conquest, or not conquest, but via crusade and all of that stuff.
Right.
So using that as a form of penance, and that is what created the theological basis for let's have a religiously, not state-based, but religiously holy conflict, and we can,
A sanctifying conflict.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well,
It is interesting.
I think that's the move. I think that's, and we for one will do our part with the thumbnail of this video.
Yeah.
It's like we're gonna.
Pope Urban was the Pope for Urban II was the Pope for the First Crusade, the People's Crusade. Then
not the children's.
The Third was the Crusade, or the Second Crusade. Third Crusade was Pope Gregory, Pope Clement, Pope Celestine, and then Pope Innocent. That's what This was the Fourth Crusade.
People's Crusade was wild just because
how
of
many
how like
crusades are
savagely
there?
short-lived
9
it was.
crusades?
Like it was basically just a bunch of unarmed peasants wandering into the Levant and then just getting immediately cut down by Saracen-like cavalry.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, that didn't work at all.
And they didn't learn anything when we did that in Texas with the Apaches.
Well, the cool thing is, in the Apaches, dude, I went into a deep dive with the Apaches when I moved to Texas. I was like, the Texas Rangers and the Apaches had like this huge battle that was raging.
That's
and
all.
There really wasn't there was not a technology advantage on either side. It was just a bunch of like rough and tumble Texas Rangers that like were
the lever action, dude.
Seven.
It was the Winchester that turned the tide.
I think it was the Colt, one of the Colt. Anyway, it was a particular gun. Maybe it was a Winchester.
Yeah, it was the Winchester of 97. The
and then all of a sudden,
Winchester of 1197.
The Comanches were not able to survive that onslaught.
Because they could shoot and ride. But that's something I learned. If you didn't know this, that was very fascinating. That that was the whole reason for like pushing homesteaders out into Texas was like, hey, like go out there and set up a homestead, and all this land is free. Yep, totally is. Nothing,
Totally free.
Nothing out there. Right. Nothing out there you need to be worried about at all. The beacons are lit. Gondor calls for aid.
That's right. Well, there was
homestead after homestead on fire, and it's just armed and equipped the Apaches.
Because Texas was an independent country for a little bit, and then they basically joined the United States, and then
that in there.
And then they started like attacking the Mexican federales, and then they crossed the border into Mexico, and then they got pinned down, and so like they kind of hunkered in, and they sent a message to Washington and said, "Hey, we got these people, these federales, and they're we're across the border. Here's what do you want us to do? We need send some help." And then Washington came back and said, "Surrender." Like they're like, "F you guys."
Never heard of her.
That. Oh man, exactly.
Yeah.
So Texas is a beautiful state. Definitely.
It is indeed.
Independent.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see what comes out of this. I will be fascinated to hear the people who actually know a lot more about this than we do.
Yeah, I'm looking for the commentaries. I don't really care too much about the Fox News or the CNN or the MSNBC commentaries. I'm waiting for like Trent Horn or Jimmy Akin or some of these big YouTube Catholics,
proper papists.
Yeah, that actually have something to say. Honestly, I don't think that they'll really say much other than, well, he's our leader now, so let's fall in line. I mean, that's the crazy thing when you have a pep, and I wonder if that has to do like just the American culture. It's like we don't need a king, so we're very much opposed to
no kings,
popes,
which is weird because God said that too.
Yeah.
Just throwing it
You
out
don't
there.
want a king, right?
You don't want a king. You don't want a king. Turns out it's not great. Also, no popes.
Right.
We had a vicar of Christ. It was Christ.
Right.
Just throwing that out there.
Like there is like a sense of a unity lost that I think would grieve the Apostle Paul for sure if he were alive today. But I think that the travesty of indulgences and all of the horrible things that the Catholic Church was doing and how it was kind of really just falling apart. And there was even like a reformation internally that needed to happen, that was happening. And it took Martin Luther to really just shake things up to get to a point where, like, hey, let's go back to what the apostles were saying here. Let's not make everything so exclusive, and let's let the common man read the Bible. Now, that caused a lot of problems, but in the end of the day, like, we got the gospel to the masses. And I think today we're in a way better position than if we didn't have some sort of reformation. I think Catholics would agree with that. Like, would we ask the average Catholic, like, if there was never a reformation, would you like the Catholic Church in the state that it would have been today? Probably
And
no.
they would be like, yes, because
that's
the Papa
the way that
has
God
declared it. So
right, because the
Yeah,
gates
'cause
of
you can't-
hell cannot prevail against the church. I am
That's right.
convinced that the proper translation is that the church is on the offensive, not the defensive. We're
Yeah,
talking about the
agreed.
gates of hell not withstanding the church, not prevailing. Like, oh, the church is being built on this rock person, Peter,
No.
and we're going to be able to survive. Like, that's the message? That's the message of Jesus? No. The message of Jesus is, hey, you see that hill, this mountain over here, this Mount Hermon? Yeah, Caesarea Philippi, where we can see it.
Yeah.
That's the gate of hell. This gates of hell, and that's where we're going to build the church. We're going to build it on enemy
we're going to build it
territory,
on the offensive in the front
and we're
yard.
going to be the offensive,
of-
and they're not going to be able
Yeah.
to withstand us. And what has
Right.
happened? The
Yeah.
world and the powers and the principalities have not been able to withstand the onslaught of the gospel message being pushed out.
Yeah,
Like,
or
why isn't
Josh,
that
but Josh,
the
doesn't
most
it make way
common
more sense?
understanding?
Doesn't it make way more sense though that God would instill, like, he would get rid of the priest class that already existed so he could instill like another priest class,
Right.
And that he would
Like-
create a sacrificial system via the Eucharist and
Right.
all of these other sacraments that would just they would be just kind of like
Guarantee
the
that-
other ones,
Right.
But different.
Well, that's the thing.
What?
That's the crazy thing. You look at the Catholic Church and you juxtaposition, you put it side by side or pro forma right over on top of the Jewish sacrificial system, and it's very similar. Very similar. I don't see, like, we're not actually, the veil was torn and the Catholics didn't get the message, right? Like the
priesthood
the
of
veil
believers.
was torn. Well, and
You know?
because they'll argue, and Catholics, if you're watching this, like, I oftentimes hear the claim, well, Jesus said to the apostles, whatever, I'll give you the power to forgive sins, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and things like that. And the way that they use that as if it was a directive for just the apostolic succession, and then the Pope
apostles that
essentially
were sitting
gives
there. Yeah.
the authority to all of these other elders or priests, whatever they want to call them, to give the forgiveness of sins and all these things. But you look at the rest of Scripture, and it doesn't even align with that. What do we got here?
Not at
Tim?
all.
Okay, so this guy doesn't tweet that much, which actually makes it really easy to leaf through them and just kind of take his temperature on some things. But so this is from 2015, him tweeting an article of why Donald Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric, blah, 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 blah. Let's see. A lot of it is in Spanish, but, like, come on, man. Learn the language.
He was a Peruvian bishop.
And he's in America. He had linked to an
But
article.
be fair, he's in Chicago, so they don't speak much English in Chicago either. So,
Harsh.
All right,
Harsh
yeah,
but
so we've
fair.
got the whole reject racism and seek justice silliness, but whoever originally
2020.
tweeted that is gone. Yeah, so yeah, you can go back farther, but
How
this
long do we think
article-
it takes him before he shows up at the White House?
gosh. How long do you think before it takes Donald Trump to revoke his citizenship? That's
Oh,
the Pope. Look, and the Pope
Bruh.
starts going and saying, Donald Trump, you're not going to.
hey, we call
What if
this
dude,
is
what if because
what if he
Vance is
renounces
a
it?
Catholic, dude? What if he just renounces his citizenship and just
I bet that happens.
that would
I
be
bet
the
he
move.
does.
That would.
I
Well,
bet he
here's the
does.
thing. He automatically gains diplomatic immunity by virtue of essentially now being a foreign head of state.
Right.
Okay.
Actually, I don't even know
So-
if he can remain an American by being a foreign head of state.
Well,
I don't think he
that's
can.
a good question.
No,
do popes,
I don't think you can.
We don't know how it works. Is we don't recognize dual citizenship. Well, yeah. So that's really weird because we would have to recognize him as being a pope, but in general, we don't recognize dual citizenship at all. You're either an American citizen or you're not. So I don't know how
Right.
that works because
No,
you
that's-
can't just choose not to.
No, you do. You have to. There's actions that you do that will basically result in that, and that's why, I think if you become the leader of another country, you cannot remain American.
Does that happen often?
So
That
he's-
Americans become leaders of other
Apparently
countries?
yeah.
This is
It's
probably
so-
the first time. Is this the first time that's happened?
I don't know. According to Grok, they don't formally renounce their citizenship, and once they become the Pope, the Vatican City, they immediately become a citizen of Vatican City. So it's he'd be like a Peruvian American, and
You can't do that. I don't
Vatican
think you can
citizen.
do that legally in the U.S. I do not think you can hold office in a foreign government and be an American citizen.
yeah, this would be the first time that
Ask Grok. Can you hold government office in a foreign country and be an American citizen? Because you can't be an officer in the military of a foreign country and be an American citizen.
True.
If I went, I could go enlist in the Australian Navy and still remain an American citizen, but if I commission as an officer, I would have to give up my citizenship.
Yeah, it doesn't say. It says no. There's no explicit prohibition. The law
Ask
doesn't
if you can be an
categorically
officer
Okay,
in
so
a foreign
citizenship
military
can be
and have
lost through
citizenship.
voluntary acts such as swearing allegiance to a foreign state or acquiring its nationality.
There you
But
go.
this is not automatic. The Vatican's unique status as both a religious and sovereign entity complicates matter. Yeah, so I don't think there's really a precedent for it.
Though there's
frankly.
no precedent. I don't think it's ever happened.
Because I want to say that I think cardinals, I believe cardinals
They have Vatican citizenship.
citizenship.
They do.
Yeah, as well.
But that's dual citizenship. But they don't have
Right.
any legal, they're not, or at least maybe not. Maybe they are. Well, I guess that's not true because some of them are they're Secretary of State. Yeah, how are you going to be the Secretary of State of the Vatican and be an American citizen at the same time?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
feel like
I
you
don't
would
know.
almost have to. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily come up, but you would almost have to renounce your American citizenship just because then you are, as far as America is concerned, just a foreign head of state, which actually makes you more privileged in America, as long
Yes.
as you are allowed into America in the first
Correct.
place. So, if he doesn't renounce his American citizenship, he's going to have to pay his parking tickets.
Yeah, we're not like
Right.
we're not like Rome where you could be, king of the Jews and a Roman citizen or be a Roman,
Right.
fealty or like Herod where you're a placed viceroy.
Oh, all right. We've got a WordPress link from the Pope. The Mysteries of Jesus the Migrant. Okay.
Gosh, why is this, dude? What
We're gonna
what
MAGA
people- this is. I get the idea, this thought process that it's compassionate, but that is the gaslighting. The reality
Yeah.
is more people means an increased GDP for countries. It's more money for countries. It's a quick and easy way to raise the amount of money that you make in the GDP of a country by letting the most amount of people in, which for some of these countries, like in Europe, I don't know if that was their intent, but ultimately it backfires because you end up breaking the system. So it's like a short-term gain for a long-term loss. And I don't, there's so many things.
Well, it's also just vindictive. If you have a giant surplus of food or whatever, and there's a bunch of hungry people, by all means, distribute that as it's needed. But what's being advocated when you're talking about migration is the forced redistribution from one set of people to another. But that's considered completely acceptable and a not serious objection, just because the idea is, oh, well, the people you're giving it to are worse off than the people we're taking it from, so just sacrifice. And so it's like, well, no, if you want to sacrifice your own things, that's fine, but you don't get a sense of self-righteousness and moral superiority by judicially compelling other people to sacrifice their resources, their opportunities, whatever, for others.
And pushing that from the pulpit, from a, you know, as a pastor, I think that this is like when guys like him or any other pastor gets up and then rails as if like you bring it from a policy place back to a biblical principle. It's like, just because I have an issue with a bad immigration policy doesn't mean that I don't understand, you know, the theology of loving my neighbor. It just means how I want to go about it is different. And that's like, I hate articles like that because it's just a gross oversimplification of something, as if like it's a false binary.
It is, but my point is just that he tweets so little that the few things that he actually chose to put out there and say, hey, go look at this,
says a lot.
Are strictly from a very social justice perspective.
Interesting.
So I think that just bolsters my initial reaction, is that they wanted a social justice pope, and they just didn't want someone who was quite so on the record as having said so.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. If it makes sense that one of the Francis cardinals, appointed cardinals, would have been elected, and he was very close to Francis, apparently, too. So, you know, well, I think that this kind of is a turning point here. It's like, let's go every 10 years so that there is, you know, every 20 years of being a pope, or potentially shorter, and then we get new popes every 20 years, and that's not enough time for there to be a significant cultural shift, and we can just keep going, appointing cardinals that are within our, you know, tradition. And
well, and it's not, in my opinion, a significant turning point. It's pretty much just more of the same, you know.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think they've gone over the point of no return.
Yeah,
at this point.
You're saying it's the fact that we're back
agreed.
to that, we're doing this whole like short run pope thing is a change from, you know, like John Paul. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, folks, if you've stuck with us this long, thanks for tuning in with us for the new revelation of our new American pope, at least American for right now. The jury's out. We're gonna figure.
We'll see how
we're
that
gonna
goes.
figure out if he remains America, if he remains America's pope, if we want him as America's pope. How about that?
There you go.
We don't want him.
I think because he's an American, like, Trump is going to find him as a competitive threat, and he's going to get even more religious. And he's like, "Look, keep your pope hat out of America."
Yeah,
you know.
We had that guy. He was a guy. Not a good guy, but an American guy. We thought maybe partially American. I don't know, but you know, we're making him better over here. We're doing more here. You know, we're yeah. Dude, I could totally see it now. It's coming.
Sorry, Twitter's already picked up on these things that I just called out, which is like, were there really no papal candidates available who hadn't publicly attacked both the president and vice president of the United States?
Yeah.
It's fine. You know that's been like, can you imagine what's happening right now in the Trump cabinet, where they're all doing exactly what we're doing? They're like, who's this guy? But it's like, oh man, he publicly disavowed. He's like, I could just see him like, no, don't say anything yet. Yeah. Oh, man. Anyway, well, hey, if you've stuck around, like, subscribe, share with friends. Glad you're here. Till next week. It's been another fantastic episode, we think.
We're all learning
together. About this
We're having
podcast.
fun.
Bye.